The last 10 minutes of class felt like they stretched on forever. The second hand on the clock crawled, ticking away each painstaking moment. Ms. Fields, the no-nonsense math teacher, stood at the front of the room, tapping a thick textbook against her palm like a gavel. She scanned the classroom, her sharp eyes settling on the back row. "Mallory Jensen," she said, her voice crisp and commanding. "Come up and solve this." A wave of whispers swept through the room like an electric current. Mallory froze, her pencil pausing mid-doodle on the edge of her notebook. She glanced up slowly, unsure if she'd heard correctly. "Me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Yes, you," Miss Fields replied, an impatient edge creeping into her tone. "Let's see if you've been paying attention." The air in the room thickened. Students turned in their seats, their curiosity mixed with disbelief. Mallory was the quiet one, the girl who seemed content to fade into the background. She wasn't the kind of student teachers usually called on for anything, much less something as monumental as this. The problem on the board was enormous, sprawling across the surface in a maze of numbers, fractions, and variables. It wasn't just a question, it was a declaration of war. Mallory hesitated, clutching her pencil tightly. "Are you sure? Maybe someone else—" "No, Mallory," Miss Fields interrupted, folding her arms. "I want to see what you're capable of." The challenge hung in the air, daring her to take a step forward. Her classmates exchanged glances, their whispers growing louder. "Why her? She's gonna choke, for sure. She barely talks. She probably doesn't even know where to start." Mallory felt her cheeks flush. Her instinct was to shrink further into her seat, to let the moment pass her by. But something deep inside her stirred, something she couldn't ignore. She rose slowly, her movements deliberate, and walked to the front of the room. The whispers died down, replaced by a tense silence. All eyes were on her now. When she reached the board, she paused, staring at the equation. Her reflection glimmered faintly in the glossy black surface, and she could see the nervous tension in her own expression. "Whenever you're ready," Miss Fields said, her tone almost mocking. Mallory took the chalk, her fingers brushing the cool surface. It felt heavier than it should have, as if the weight of her classmates' judgment had seeped into it. She exhaled deeply and let her eyes trace the problem. For a moment, the world around her faded. The chatter, the tension, the pressure, all of it dissolved as her mind focused. Numbers began to align themselves in her head, patterns emerging where others saw only chaos. It was like solving a puzzle, each piece clicking into place with satisfying precision. The silence in the room grew oppressive as she started to write. At first, her hand moved hesitantly, sketching out the basics. Then, as her confidence grew, the pace quickened. The scratch of chalk against the board was the only sound in the room. Her classmates leaned forward, their disbelief slowly giving way to curiosity. "She actually knows what she's doing," someone whispered. "No way, this has to be a fluke," another replied. Ms. Fields watched closely, her smirk fading. Mallory blocked them out, focusing only on the numbers. Step by step, she unraveled the problem, breaking it into smaller, manageable parts. Every stroke of the chalk felt like a small victory, a quiet rebellion against the years of being overlooked. Finally, she reached the last step. With a decisive motion, she wrote the answer and underlined it. Then she stepped back, her heart pounding. The board was a tapestry of calculations, but everything was clear and precise. The room remained silent, as if no one dared to breathe. Miss Fields approached the board, her expression unreadable. She studied the work carefully, tracing each step with her finger. "This can't be," she muttered, her voice trailing off. Mallory crossed her arms. "It's right," she said, quietly, her voice steady. Miss Fields frowned, double-checking her notes. After a moment, she straightened, her expression shifting from disbelief to reluctant admiration. "She's right," Miss Fields announced, turning to face the class. The room erupted into chaos. "What?" She actually did it? No way. Mallory felt the weight lift from her shoulders, replaced by something unfamiliar. Pride. As the bell rang, signaling the end of class, her classmates crowded around her. That was incredible, said Ethan, the charismatic guy who usually ruled the social scene. How did you do that? Mallory shrugged, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I've always been good at math, she said simply. Well, you should show it off more, Ethan replied, smiling. Seriously, that was amazing. As the crowd began to thin, Miss Fields approached her. Her usual stern demeanor had softened. Mallory, she said, her voice quieter than before, I owe you an apology. I underestimated you. That was exceptional work. Mallory nodded, unsure how to respond. Don't let anyone, including yourself, hold you back, Miss Fields added. You have a gift. Use it. For the first time, Mallory felt seen, not as a quiet girl hiding in the shadows, but as someone capable of standing out. As she walked into the bright afternoon sun, a small smile played at her lips. She had spent so long hiding her abilities, afraid of drawing attention. But now she realized she didn't have to hide anymore. This was her moment, and she was ready to embrace it.